How do I prove my Judaism for purposes of Aliyah to Israel according to the law of return? Hi, my name is Joshua Pex. I'm a lawyer that deals with immigration to Israel, and recently, more than ever I would say, we're seeing all kinds of issues and difficulties with people actually proving their Judaism or the Judaism of their parents or grandparents for purposes of Aliyah to Israel. So you know the right of return, Chok HaShvut in Hebrew, says in its first paragraph, every Jew has the right to immigrate, make Aliyah, and receive Israeli citizenship. But this right is also extended to children and also grandchildren of Jews and their spouses. But it might sound strange that how do I prove Judaism? You know, people might say, for sure, I know I'm Jewish, or I know that my father, my grandfather, my grandparents, grandmother were Jewish, but many times it's more difficult to prove than one would expect. So first of all, I want to start with what is not considered proof for Judaism according to the Israeli law. The immigration law will not accept people that come with DNA tests, for example. People can come with all kinds of DNA breakdowns that say I'm 40% Ashkenazi Jewish or Sephardic. Well, even if you come with such a document that says, and it might be true, that you are 100% Jewish in your DNA, this is not considered at all sufficient evidence. Also, we have issues of people coming and saying, in my family, many generations, people have kept the Torah, kept the Jewish laws. I know that my parents, my grandparents celebrated Pesach, Passover. They lit Chanukiah during Hanukkah. Well, this is also not considered evidence. You need to come with actually documents, written evidence, and it also has to be fairly recent. So all the stories of crypto Jews or Marano Jews that had to hide their Judaism, this is fascinating also for me to hear these stories, and for sure there's a lot of truth in them, but at the moment, according to Israeli law, this is not accepted at all as proof for Aliyah. Another thing we deal with is conversion to Judaism. So the law obviously says that every Jew has the right to return, and also a person that converted to Judaism is considered a Jew according to the law of return. But what we see in practice is that all those people who converted will run into more difficulties, and especially if we're talking about conversions that are not recognized by rabbis. You know, rabbis that are not recognized by Israeli immigration, this is much, much more difficult. And there can be all kinds of conversions that are very sincere, they're very real, but there can be rabbis that are not recognized by Israel as legitimate, and these conversions you will find a lot of difficulties immigrating to Israel based on these conversions of these Beit Din, these synagogues. Rabbis need to be recognized. So who is actually considered Jewish according to the law of return? According to Israeli immigration law. So first of all, you have to understand that different countries actually have a different way of proving Judaism. For example, many people that make Aliyah from former Soviet Union countries, or else their ancestors came from countries like Russia, Ukraine. In those countries, actually many times in the birth certificate, it would say the nationality of a person, and it would actually say nationality in those times was also connected to religion. So they will come with birth certificates that actually say Ibrei in Russian or other languages, and it means Jewish. So this is considered good evidence, but it still has to go through approval of a department within the Ministry of Interior, together with the Prime Minister office, which is called Nativ, and they approve these kind of certificates. For people who are making Aliyah, for example, from France, there's the rabbinate in France, the chief rabbi's office, and they are very, very instrumental in showing or actually approving that the person from French origin is actually also part of the Jewish community. And if we're talking about the United States, many people, especially second and third generation of Jews, have sort of lost touch with Jewish communities. Maybe their grandparents came from New York, they were very close to the Jewish community in one of the big cities, but their parents and they themselves already a third generation, they might be, in Arkansas or somewhere like that. They had very little possibility to even be connected to the Jewish community. They say, yes, my grandfather was Jewish in New York. I don't have many documents, but I know he was Jewish. And my parents already, they moved somewhere else. They didn't really keep tradition. They didn't keep much contact with the Jewish community. In these cases, it might be pretty difficult. Lately, we're seeing, for example, people having difficulty to prove Judaism because in the States, more and more people are getting cremated. So in the past, it was a very strong evidence that if you were, your parents or grandparents were buried in a Jewish cemetery, well, maybe you don't have much connection to the Jewish community anymore, but you have this strong evidence of burial in Jewish cemetery. But lately I'm seeing cases where the parents were cremated, and now this is another hurdle. So what we offer is genealogy research. You'll need to bring also a letter from a rabbi. Maybe you can't bring a letter of a rabbi yourself because you no longer are part really of a Jewish community, but you can maybe bring a letter from a rabbi regarding your parents or grandparents or the synagogue that were in touch with your parents. Or you have to start with family research. You have to find evidence. You have to find a ketubah, a bar mitzvah certificate. Maybe in those days people belonged to Jewish associations. So these are the kind of clients I'm meeting recently. And if you have any questions regarding proof of Judaism and Aliyah to Israel, we'll be glad to hear from you. We work together with genealogists and we'll be able to refer you in the right direction. And later, when you come and have more evidence, then we will also be glad to assist you in the process of Aliyah and Israeli citizenship. Thank you for listening.